Oxbow incident wasn't just another Western. It was Hollywood's conscience bleeding onto celluloid during America's darkest hour, a 75-minute nightmare that studio executives buried, critics praised, and audiences rejected because it told truths they couldn't bear to hear. Behind that devastating final scene, where Henry Fonda reads a dead man's letter in a saloon full of murderers, lies a production history as brutal as the lynching at its center. Director William Wellman bankrupted himself to make it. Daryl Zanuck predicted it would fail. The Motion Picture Association tried to gut it, the budget was slashed to the bone, and when it was finally complete, Fox locked it in a vault for months because nobody knew how to sell a movie about America's original sin. Here are 10 dark facts about the Oxbow incident, from the Mae West fever dream that almost destroyed it to the personal tragedy that drove its star to enlist in a real war. And stick around for the bonus fact at the end. Trust me, you won't see it coming. Let's ride. Number 10. The Artificial Nightmare. You might think the film's suffocating atmosphere was an artistic choice, but it was actually a budget war. Director William Wellman wanted to shoot on location in the vast open range, but Daryl Zanuck, convinced the movie would flop, slashed the budget to the bone. He forbade travel, he forbade location shooting. He forced Wellman to shoot the entire movie, even the outdoor scenes, on a soundstage. The result is a claustrophobic, artificial nightmare, where the sky is a painted backdrop and the prairie ends at the studio wall. Critics at the time complained it looked fake, but history proved them wrong. That breathless, trapped feeling where the characters seem stuck in a world that ends at the horizon line perfectly matches the story's moral suffocation. Zanuck's cheapness inadvertently created one of the most distinctive visual styles in Western history. They weren't riding the open range, they were riding in a cage. Number 9. Gary Cooper's rejection. Gary Cooper reads the script. He understands exactly what Gil Carter represents. Not a hero who saves the day, but a man who watches innocent people hang and does nothing to stop it. Cooper, America's favorite cowboy, the man who embodied frontier honor in dozens of westerns, makes a choice that defines his limitations as an actor. He turns it down flat. The refusal stings Wellman personally. Cooper possesses the exact qualities the role demands: the weathered face, the lanky frame, the ability to embody Western masculinity while suggesting something broken underneath. But Cooper wants no part of a film where the protagonist stands by while injustice unfolds. He's built a career on being the man who intervenes, who stops the bad guys, who rides off into the sunset having restored order. The Oxbow incident offers him the chance to play complicity instead of heroism, guilt instead of triumph. Cooper sees the trap clearly. If audiences watch him fail to prevent a lynching, they'll hate Gil Carter, and by extension, they'll hate Gary Cooper. So he walks. The role goes to Henry Fonda, an actor willing to be hated if the hatred serves the truth. Fonda accepts a reduced salary because he believes in the material. He'll later call it one of only 2 Fox films he took pride in during his contract period. The other was The Grapes of Wrath. Cooper, meanwhile, continues playing heroes. He never publicly discusses why he rejected the Oxbow incident, but the silence speaks volumes about the calculations stars make when choosing between comfort and conscience. Number 8. Fonda's childhood trauma. September 28, 1919. Downtown Omaha, Nebraska. A 14-year-old boy named Henry Fonda stands in his father's printing office, looking out a window that overlooks the courthouse square. Below him, somewhere between 5,000 and 20,000 white people have gathered to commit murder. His father puts him in the car after supper, drives him back downtown to the printing office, an unusual trip at an unusual hour. They climb the stairs together, cross the empty office, stand at that window, and watch as the mob storms the courthouse for a black man named Will Brown. From that second-story window, Fonda witnesses the breakdown of civilization. He sees the rope. He sees the fury. He watches as Brown is lynched by the citizens of Omaha, a sight so horrific that souvenir hunters would later cut up the rope to sell as trinkets. Fonda doesn't speak about it for over 50 years. When he finally breaks his silence in a 1975 interview, his voice cracks with the weight of decades. "It was the most horrendous sight I'd ever seen. My hands were wet. There were tears in my eyes. All I could think of was that young black man dangling at the end of a rope. That image never leaves him. It burns itself into his psyche, shapes his politics, fuels his opposition to racism for the rest of his life." When Wellman offers him the role of Gil Carter in the Oxbow incident, a man who stands in a crowd and watches innocent people get lynched, Fonda doesn't just accept the part. He inhabits it with the ferocity of someone exorcising a personal demon. He wardrobes himself 6 weeks early, lives in costume, becomes Gil Carter so completely that by the time cameras roll, he carries the stench of failure and complicity in his bones. Every scene where he stands silent while the mob moves toward murder, Fonda isn't just acting. He's reliving that September night in Omaha, trying to undo what he witnessed at 14, attempting to save Will Brown through cinema decades after failing to save him in reality. Number 7. The Motion Picture Association's Censorship War. Joseph Breen didn't become the most feared censor in Hollywood history by compromising. As head of the Production Code Administration from 1934 to 1954, this Irish Catholic crusader wielded absolute power over American cinema. No film could be released without his seal of approval. And when the script for the Oxbow incident lands on his desk in 1942, Breen sees trouble. The initial script suggests that the sheriff condones the lynchings. This sends the PCA into full alarm mode. Lynching scenes violate multiple provisions of the production code, which explicitly forbids content that might lower moral standards or teach methods of crime. The treatment of the lynchings and characterization of those participating become subjects of lengthy, contentious discussions between the PCA and the studio. Breen's office scrutinizes every scene, every line of dialogue, every moral implication. On June 9, 1942, Breen sends a letter to studio public relations head Jason S. Joy laying out his demands. The script will be approved only if specific conditions are met. Major Tetley's suicide must be retained, thus constituting a punishment for the ringleader of the lynching party. There must be clear indication that the entire gang will be arrested. The character of Gil must be rewritten to make him less callous and more active in trying to stop the lynchings. Davies' denunciation of the killings must be retained. Every demand carries the implicit threat of rejection, and without PCA approval, the film cannot be distributed. Wellman and screenwriter Lamar Trotty navigate this minefield carefully. They keep the suicide, they add lines suggesting arrests will follow. They soften Gil's character without compromising the story's essential truth, that good men can become complicit in evil through inaction. The PCA eventually grants approval, but the battle shapes the final film in ways both subtle and profound. What audiences see on screen represents a negotiated version of Clarke's novel, powerful enough to shock, but sanitized enough to satisfy Hollywood's self-appointed moral guardians. Number 6. The film Fox wanted to bury. Spring 1943, the Oxbow incident wraps production. Wellman delivers his cut. The studio executives screen it and panic. They've got a 75-minute film about mob violence, vigilante justice, and the murder of innocent men. No romance, no comic relief, no happy ending, just guilt, shame, and a devastating moral reckoning. And they have absolutely no idea how to market it to a nation at war. Fox keeps the film on the shelf for months. Not because it needs additional work or reshoots, not because of technical problems or legal issues. They bury it because it's too dark, too honest, too confrontational for audiences who want escapism. America is losing the war in 1943. Allied forces struggle in Europe and the Pacific. Casualties mount. Morale sags. The last thing moviegoers want is a meditation on American injustice and moral failure. The marketing department struggles to craft a campaign. How do you sell a film where the protagonist fails to prevent a lynching? Where the cavalry arrives too late? Where the knowledge of innocence comes only after 3 men swing from a tree? Traditional Western advertising won't work. There are no heroic gunfights or romantic conquests. The film's power lies precisely in what it denies audiences. Catharsis, heroism, the restoration of order. Finally, Fox releases it with minimal fanfare in May 1943. The critical response divides sharply. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times recognizes its achievement even while acknowledging its commercial doom. It is not a picture which will brighten or cheer your day, but it is one which for sheer stark drama is currently hard to beat. Harrison's reports savages it as depressing, unpleasant, at times horrible, and suggests whoever selected such material deserves a booby prize. The studio's worst fears materialize at the box office. The film earns $750,000 domestically, barely covering its production costs. Darryl Zanuck later recalls it as a flop that pulled less than a Laurel and Hardy comedy released the same period. Number 5. Zanuck's Blackmail. Darryl F. Zanuck sits across from William Wellman in 1942 and delivers an ultimatum disguised as a compromise. He's read Walter Van Tilburg Clarke's novel. He recognizes its power. He even wants his name on the picture. But he knows it won't make money. So Zanuck makes Wellman an offer that's really a threat. You can do it, but it won't make a cent. The conditions arrive next. Zanuck agrees to produce the Oxbow incident on exactly one condition. Wellman must direct 2 other films for Fox first, Thunderbirds, 1942, and Buffalo Bill, 1944. Not films. Wellman chooses not passion projects or artistic statements. Formula pictures, studio assignments, the kind of commercial product Wellman has spent his career trying to escape. Sight unseen, Wellman must commit to directing whatever Fox puts in front of him. Wellman faces an impossible calculation. He's already bought the rights from Harold Hurley using his own money. He shopped the project to every studio he ever worked for and received rejections from all of them. Zanuck represents his last, best chance to see Clark's novel reach the screen, but accepting means surrendering creative autonomy. It means directing films he doesn't believe in to earn the right to make one he does. It means becoming Fox's contract director for years. He accepts. Later, he'll claim he'd do anything for the Oxbow incident, even prostitute his talent on assembly line entertainment. The deal haunts him throughout production. Every time he fights with Zanuck over budget or casting or studio interference, Wellman knows he's trapped by his own desperation. He sold himself to make this film, and Zanuck never lets him forget it. The two barely speak during production. Their relationship remains poisoned by the fundamental inequality of the arrangement. Wellman needs Zanuck more than Zanuck needs Wellman. The irony cuts deep. Wellman makes Thunderbirds and Buffalo Bill competent, forgettable studio products that earned money and disappeared. The Oxbow incident loses money and becomes a masterpiece that influences generations of filmmakers. Clint Eastwood calls it his favorite film. Sam Peckinpah watches it spellbound and learns lessons about violence and morality that shape his entire career. The film Fox treated as a commercial albatross Wellman had to beg to make becomes his most enduring legacy. Number 4. The Mae West fever dream. Before Wellman, before Zanuck, before Fox, before any of it crystallized into the film we know, the Oxbow incident existed as a property owned by a failing producer named Harold Hurley, and Hurley carried a vision so spectacularly deranged it defies belief. Hurley approaches Wellman while the director vacations with his wife. He pitches his idea for adapting Clark's dark, harrowing novel about frontier justice and mob violence. But there's a catch. Hurley wants to cast Mae West, not in a supporting role, not as a character reimagined to accommodate her persona. He wants Mae West in this lynch mob western, and he's got plans for her. When the posse and the tired cowboys gather in the saloon, Hurley tells Wellman, Mae will cheer them up with song and dance. Let that image settle. A mob of men returns from hanging 3 innocent people. They're soaked in guilt, drowning in shame, grappling with the knowledge that they've just committed murder. And in Hurley's vision, Mae West sachets onto screen to perform a musical number. The tonal dissonance approaches surrealism. It's not merely misguided, it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the source material so profound it borders on parody. Wellman, to his credit, recognizes the idea as ridiculous and refuses. But the bizarre demand has real consequences. Hurley owns the rights, and he's determined to attach West to any adaptation. This single casting condition effectively kills the project for years. No serious director wants to make a solemn meditation on American injustice with Mae West performing vaudeville routines. The rights remain in Hurley's hands, unusable and deteriorating, until Wellman encounters the producer again back in Hollywood. This time, Wellman makes a different offer. He pays Hurley $6,500, $500 more than Hurley originally spent acquiring the rights. Wellman buys his way out of the Mae West nightmare and finally owns the property outright. He's now thousands of dollars poorer and still has no studio backing. But at least nobody's demanding song and dance numbers in a lynching film. Number 3. The Oscar Anomaly. The 1944 Academy Awards present a remarkable field. 10 films compete for Best Picture. Casablanca, which wins For Whom the Bell Tolls, Heaven Can Wait, The Human Comedy, In Which We Serve, Madame Curie, The More the Merrier, The Song of Bernadette, Watch on the Rhine, and The Oxbow Incident. What distinguishes Wellman's film from every other nominee isn't its subject matter or its commercial failure. It's the stark mathematical fact of its isolation. The Oxbow Incident receives exactly 1 Academy Award nomination, Best Picture, and nothing else. No acting nods for Fonda, Dana Andrews, or Anthony Quinn. No recognition for Arthur C. Miller's stark cinematography. No screenplay nomination for Lamar Trotti's lean adaptation. No editing, no music, no supporting performances, just that single Best Picture nomination, standing alone. This peculiar circumstance, a film nominated for the top prize without a single nomination in any other category, had happened 16 times between 1927 and 1943. But the Oxbow Incident marks the last time it ever occurs. In the 8 decades since, no film has achieved this particular distinction. The Academy eventually changes its rules and practices, making such isolation virtually impossible. The nomination itself represents a strange kind of recognition. The Academy acknowledges the film's achievement at the highest level while simultaneously refusing to honor any individual element that makes it work. It's as if the film's power resides in some ineffable whole that can't be broken down into component parts deserving individual praise. Or perhaps Academy voters recognize the film's importance while feeling deeply uncomfortable celebrating specific performances in a story about mob violence and moral failure. The Oxbow incident loses to Casablanca, a film that gives audiences hope, romance, sacrifice, and the triumph of individual conscience over fascism. Exactly what wartime America needs. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Casablanca shows Americans as heroes. The Oxbow incident shows Americans as murderers. One film becomes the most beloved classic in Hollywood history. The other becomes a masterpiece that makes people too uncomfortable to watch more than once. Number 2. Box office catastrophe. Daryl Zanuck predicts it. The marketing department fears it. Critics warn about it. And when the Oxbow incident finally reaches theaters in May 1943, reality confirms every dark expectation. The film doesn't just fail at the box office, it collapses. $750,000 in domestic rentals. That's the number. For a studio picture with Henry Fonda, directed by William Wellman, adapted from a celebrated novel, it's a disaster. The film earns less than throwaway comedies and B pictures released the same year. Zanuck's comparison stings because it's true. A forgettable Laurel and Hardy comedy outperforms this carefully crafted moral statement about American injustice. The timing explains part of the failure. Spring 1943 represents one of the darkest periods of World War II for American forces. The North African campaign grinds on, the Pacific War looks increasingly brutal and uncertain, casualty lists grow longer, morale sags under the weight of bad news from multiple fronts. Audiences flock to theaters seeking escape, romance, adventure, anything to temporarily forget the war consuming their sons and husbands. The Oxbow incident offers no escape. It presents a mirror, and the reflection is ugly. Americans forming a mob, Americans ignoring evidence, Americans rushing to judgment, Americans murdering innocent men, Americans grappling with guilt afterward but facing no real consequences. The film strips away every comforting myth about frontier justice and American exceptionalism, leaving audiences with a 75-minute indictment of mob mentality that feels less like entertainment and more like an accusation. The critical response recognizes this discomfort explicitly. Bosley Crowther's review in the New York Times, while praising the film's artistic achievement, opens with a warning: it is not a picture which will brighten or cheer your day. He understands that the film's power comes from its refusal to provide catharsis or comfort. But he also recognizes commercial reality. It is hard to imagine a picture with less promise commercially. For Zanuck, the failure confirms his initial assessment. He never considers a film successful unless it makes money. By that standard, the Oxbow incident represents everything wrong with prestige pictures that prioritize message over audience appeal. He agreed to make it for artistic reasons, fully expecting it to lose money. He's proven right. The film's failure gives him ammunition for years. Proof that dark, socially conscious westerns don't sell tickets. But something else happens in the decades after release. The Oxbow incident doesn't fade into obscurity like most failed films. It persists, gets reassessed, grows in critical reputation, influences filmmakers like Peckinpah and Eastwood, gets selected for preservation in the National Film Registry, becomes the film Fonda takes most pride in from his Fox years. The box office catastrophe of 1943 transforms into a different kind of success, one measured not in ticket sales, but in lasting impact on American cinema. Number 1. Fonda's immediate enlistment. The final shot wraps. Wellman calls cut on the last scene. Henry Fonda removes his costume, but something about Gil Carter remains embedded in his skin. He doesn't celebrate rap, doesn't attend any farewell parties, doesn't take time to process the emotional weight of the material he just inhabited. Instead, Fonda does something that shocks even Hollywood's patriotic establishment. Soon after, he packs his car and drives to the Navy recruiting office in San Diego. The 38-year-old actor with a legitimate deferment he could stay in Hollywood making propaganda films and selling war bonds without anyone questioning his patriotism enlists as an ordinary sailor. Not in some cushy entertainment division, not with a guaranteed commission. He enters as quartermaster third class, the lowest possible rank assigned to the destroyer USS Satterley. "I don't want to be in a fake war in a studio," Fonda tells friends. The statement carries weight after the Oxbow incident. He's just spent weeks performing in a film about moral cowardice, about men who stand by while innocent people die, about the gap between what people say they believe and what they actually do when tested. The experience leaves him unable to continue performing while a real war rages in the Pacific. His service evolves. He's eventually commissioned as a lieutenant junior grade in air combat intelligence. He serves in the Central Pacific, seeing actual combat, experiencing the genuine terror he'd only simulated on sound stages. For his service, the Navy awards him the Bronze Star Medal, the fourth highest award for bravery or meritorious service in conflict with the enemy. The medal represents real courage in real danger, everything Gil Carter failed to demonstrate in the Oxbow incident. Fonda serves 3 years. He doesn't return to civilian life until 1946, by which time the film that drove him to enlist has become a box office failure and a critical touchstone. He never explicitly connects the two events, the completion of the Oxbow incident and his immediate enlistment, but the timing speaks for itself. Something about playing a man haunted by his failure to act makes Fonda incapable of remaining a bystander while his country fights a war. The other actors continue with their careers. Dana Andrews becomes a star. Anthony Quinn builds his reputation. Harry Morgan works steadily. But Fonda walks away from Hollywood at the height of his career, trades his leading man status for a sailor's uniform, and risks his life in the Pacific. When he finally returns to acting after the war, he's a different person. The roles he chooses carry different weight. The performances dig deeper. Something changed in him between that last day on the Oxbow set and his discharge from the Navy. Something that has everything to do with the gap between witnessing injustice and having the courage to act. Bonus fact: Wellman's $6,500 gamble. Here's what the official histories don't emphasize enough. William Wellman paid $6,500 out of his own pocket to buy the rights to the Oxbow incident from Harold Hurley, in an era when that represented serious money for even an established director. He then spent months shopping the project to every studio he'd ever worked for and got rejected by all of them. No studio wanted a dark, depressing Western about mob violence with no romance, no action sequences, and no happy ending. Wellman hemorrhaged money and time pursuing a project the entire industry considered uncommercial and potentially dangerous. By the time Zanuck finally agreed to produce it with brutal conditions attached, Wellman had already invested his personal finances and professional credibility into a property nobody else believed in. That $6,500 represents more than just money. It's proof that Wellman understood something about the Oxbow incident that the industry missed. This story needed to be told. Commercial viability be damned. He bankrupted himself, surrendered his creative autonomy to Zanuck's blackmail deal, directed 2 formula pictures he didn't believe in, and fought with censors and executives for the right to make a film he knew would fail at the box office. And he was right about all of it. The film failed commercially, lost money, earned less than Laurel and Hardy comedies, validated every studio executive who'd rejected it. But Wellman's gamble paid off in ways he couldn't have predicted in 1942. His $6,500 investment and years of struggle produced a film that redefined what Westerns could achieve, influenced generations of filmmakers, and stands today as one of the most important American films ever made. The lesson cuts both ways. Sometimes the films worth making are precisely the ones nobody wants to finance. Sometimes artistic conviction matters more than commercial viability. And sometimes a director has to risk everything, money, career, relationships, to tell a truth that Hollywood would prefer to bury. Wellman made that bet. He lost money but won immortality. The Oxbow incident failed at the box office in 1943 because Americans couldn't bear to watch themselves commit murder. But in the decades since, the film's reputation has grown precisely because it refuses to comfort, refuses to lie, refuses to suggest that good intentions excuse bad actions. Clint Eastwood calls it his favorite film. Sam Peckinpah built his career on lessons learned from its stark portrayal of violence and moral complexity. The Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry. What failed commercially in 1943 succeeded artistically for eternity. The film reminds us that mob justice is murder, that good men can be complicit in evil, and that guilt changes nothing for the dead. These remain uncomfortable truths. No wonder audiences stayed away.